Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya
Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna, everyone. So, welcome to this discussion today on most wonderful Chaitanya Caritamrita. So, we'll have the invocation and then we'll start discussing the second part of chapter 16 today. So, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
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 Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Hare Krishna devotees. So we'll discuss today the second half, not all the way to the end of chapter 16. The title of this chapter is The Lord's Attempts to Go to Vrindavan. So I'm very grateful for this opportunity and grateful for this morning reading group that is gathering every morning 9:15 until 10 o'clock, reading this most glorious Chaitanya Caritamrita and having this opportunity to discuss a few of the verses, of course, that are being discussed. It was not possible to discuss all of them, but we'll hit some of the points that we can spend a little bit of time understanding at a deeper level. So last time we talked about, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was setting a very wonderful mood for us to follow, asking for permission to go to Sri Vrindavan Dham, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Does he need to ask permission? Of course not. But showing us the mood of a devotee, he follows that nice instruction, or sets that nice instruction for us of following in the orders. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we know we follow his mood. Lord Krishna, we follow his words, and Lord Ramchandra, we follow his actions. So in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we follow his mood, and we see his great mood of humility. We discussed the great mercy that King Prataparudra received from being denied audience to him to receiving an embrace. Such an amazing escalation of extraordinary mercy King Prataparudra did, and it was earned through this very determined mood of service in a very humble mood. And then we talked a little bit about, or quite a bit about, Lord Nityananda's seemingly or apparent, disobedience of the order of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu not to come to Jagannath Puri. And we looked at this from many different angles of vision, but we understood at the ultimate level that Lord Nityananda is Guru Tattva. He's a source of all gurus. And so his only mission is to serve Krishna. And so every activity he does is for the pleasure of Krishna. And so his going to Jagannath Puri was also for the pleasure of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He knew what would please Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he was not going for his own satisfaction, his own desire to enjoy with all the devotees, although we can imagine who doesn't want to go to Puri for Rath Yatra in the midst of ecstatic kirtan and all the Vaishnavas, and that would be a joyous occasion. But Lord Nityananda's going was to please Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, not out of his own desire. And we said that when we observe the activities of a pure devotee, if we are not in that same pure state, we may draw some incorrect conclusions. Just as though if I try to look at a fine piece of art through dirty glasses, the art will appear imperfect. But it is not the art that is imperfect, it is my glasses that are imperfect. So similarly, if we try to perceive the pure devotee, the perfect devotee, through our impure heart, then we may see transgressions or deviations, but in fact they are not. And we understood the importance of acknowledging and following the ultimate orders of the Supreme Lord through Guru Parampara, and these activities of such personalities like Lord Nityananda, we have to be mindful of. And Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami himself says, who can understand the transcendental heart of Lord Nityananda? So it gives us a nice following. And one practical instruction for us is that we have to be careful in our conditioned state not to try to interpret instructions. Of course, Lord Nityananda knew the inner desire of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but we may not. So it's always safest and most advisable that we follow the instruction as it is, and not try to interpret, oh, is there a deeper meaning? Oh, is there something else? It's always safest to follow that. There's never any downside. Because it's very hard for us to understand the position. When Guru gives instruction, sometimes we wonder, well, did he really mean this? Just go as it is. It is always the safest and best approach, unless one has come to a very high and purified state. And even that, it's still recommended. So that's a practical realization we discussed last time. And then finally, we talked about verses 64 and I think 67 and a few others, where Srila Prabhupada was really emphasizing the movement of being a preaching, and how our pain today should be not the inability to go out and share this message with others, person to person, door to door, and not anything else. But that is really the only thing we are truly being precluded from doing that has great value. And Prabhupada said in that purport, it's one should not act whimsically for one's own personal satisfaction. And Srila Prabhupada made that extraordinary comment that one can even excel Lord Nityananda's service. How? By Lord Nityananda's grace. So by surrendering to the power of Lord Nityananda, one can perform extraordinary services. And one who understands where the potency comes from is able to perform extraordinary services. And Srila Prabhupada was able to revolutionize a world, surrendering to the order of his Guru and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Lord Nityananda. And what I find very special about the purports in Chaitanya Caritamrita is how much you see Srila Prabhupada drawing the inspiration from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he's revealing that in these purports as he was able to transform so many souls. It was done by the power of this amazing mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So today we'll discuss this extraordinary mercy, and I thought we could discuss three things today. So we're going to cover quite a few verses, so we're not going to discuss the whole story, but from verse 123 to verse 236 is what I'm told was covered this week. They're going so nicely and quickly. It covers a lot of ground. But we'll discuss three things. So we'll talk a little bit about Gadadhar Pandit. His appearance day was yesterday, very auspicious day. So we'll talk a little bit about Gadadhar Pandit and how he was very sweetly interacting with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then we'll spend the bulk of today's discussion talking about the transformation of this king, and the steps of his transformation. They're quite exquisite and extraordinary. We are all wondering how my heart will transform, or at least I'm wondering when it will happen. We will see how the king received such extraordinary transformation of heart. And that is a repeated theme throughout Chaitanya Caritamrita. How many souls have been delivered by the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? But this one particular pastime is very nice. And then, time permitting, we'll discuss a little bit about Sachimata's meeting of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's mentioned in just one verse here, but there is an exquisite and extraordinary presentation made by Srila Vrindavan Thakur and Chaitanya Bhagavat about this meeting, and it is amazing and extraordinary. So hopefully we have time, and we'll discuss a little bit about that. So I'll just read verse. Which verse am I reading? Let's see. I'm going to read verse 175. That's got the longest purport. So read verse 175, and then we'll back up and discuss the remaining, the earlier topics, and then come to this verse. So this verse is in context of the king who was transformed. And the verse reads in verse 175, "It must be Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself who has changed this Muslim's mind. Due to his presence, even due to his remembrance, the whole world is liberated." And purport. From this, we can understand that since the Muslim governor was a drunkard, Madhyapa, ordinarily there would have been no chance that he would change. But Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu could turn anyone's mind to Krishna consciousness. One can be delivered from material existence simply by remembering Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's holy name or by visiting him. This Krishna conscious movement is being spread throughout the world, but not even one Yamana or Mlecha addicted to drinking could have changed and accepted Krishna consciousness without Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's grace. People are often astonished to see many thousands of Westerners converted to Vaishnavism. Generally, Westerners are addicted to meat eating, drinking, gambling, and illicit sex. Therefore, their taking up to Krishna consciousness is astonishing. In India especially, there is much astonishment at this. The answer, however, is given here. Darshana Smarane Yanve Jagataya. That this change is made possible by the remembrance of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The Western devotees are very sincerely chanting the holy names of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda. By the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates, people are being purified and their consciousness directed from Maya to Krishna. The word Vishvasa refers to a secretary. This title is found among the Kayashka caste in the Hindu community. In Bengal, the title Vishvasa is still used by the Kayashkas. The word Vishvasa means faithful, and a Vishvasi is a person whom one can place faith. Sri Bhaktivinoda Thakur states that during the Muslim reign in Bengal, there was a secretariat entitled Vishvasa Khana. The office of Vishvasa Khana was a secretariat office in which only the most reliable people were employed. They were elected from the Kayashka community, a community that is still very expert in managing business and government. The secretariat of Vishvasa Khana is generally a very reliable and faithful servant. Whenever some confidential service was needed, these officers were employed. Om Jnana Timirandasya
Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shiva Shri Yukta Padakam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sarvitam Savadutam Parijasitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamsha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabadhu Bhagavate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanustute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Vasindubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Prachayane
Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatyanishatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So, we're continuing in this chapter again. The title is The Lord's Attempts to Go to Vrindavan. So, in the beginning of this section, we see a very sweet exchange between Gadadhar Pandit and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is making his way from Puri, various associates have accompanied him, and Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami names many of these associates, Ramananda Roy, Swarup Damodar, and many others. He says so many I cannot even name them all. But as he was leaving Puri and had left, Gadadhar Pandit had accompanied him, and there's a very sweet exchange. And we can remember that Gadadhar Pandit is Srimati Radharani herself. In a particular mood, she's taking kind of a submissive, loving mood to Krishna. We know like in Krishna Leela, she has a kind of a mood of where she's controlling Krishna for his pleasure. But in the appearance of Gadadhar Pandit, of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has come in the mood of Srimati Radharani. So Gadadhar Pandit is representing Srimati Radharani in this mood of kind of submissive love. And so in the childhood pastimes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Gadadhar Pandit was always very near Nimai at that time, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Sachimata, was asking because Gadadhar Pandit had a very nice way of controlling Chaitanya Mahaprabhu whenever he went into ecstasy. One time he was ripping apart his chest trying to find Krishna, and it was Gadadhar Pandit who was able to pacify him. And thus Sachimata asked and begged, please, you always be with him and take care of him. But actually, Gadadhar Pandit was not so fond of Nimai's Pandit pastimes, where he was a scholar. He was teaching Sanskrit and arguing and debate and logic. He was waiting for the Bhakti Leela to come. And so while he was there, he was really relishing these moments now that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was shown. So when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to Jagannath Puri at the order of Sachimata, Gadadhar Pandit went also. And there he took a vow that he would not leave Jagannath Puri. And Prabhupada describes this as Kshetra Sannyas. And so he took this vow that he would not leave the holy dham. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur describes a very practical application for all of us. That this Kshetra Sannyas, it is the best way to practice Vanaprastha Ashram in Kali Yuga. Vanaprastha Ashram we read in Srimad Bhagavatam, nobody will go. Vanaprastha Ashram is described in Srimad Bhagavatam. King Prithu Maharaj was submerging himself up to his neck in cold water during the winter, sitting, amidst hot fire in the summer, eating twigs and berries and living in, sleeping on the floor. That's Vanaprastha Ashram. Van means forest, so one goes to the forest. But of course, in this day, that is not so practical. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that the best way to practice Vanaprastha Ashram is to go to one of the holy dhams, Shri Vrindavan Dham, Mayapur Navadvip Dham, Purushottam, Kshetra, Jagannath Puri Dham, and take a vow to render service there. So it's a very nice practical instruction for us, and thankfully we don't have to live on twigs and berries and live on the forest floor. I'm not sure any of us would be ready to do such austerity. So Gadadhar Pandit was in Jagannath Puri, and his main service was rendering service at the Tota Gopinath temple. It's a beautiful temple, beautiful deities, and he was so lovingly serving Tota Gopinath temple, this Tota Gopinath deity, that in his very elderly age, this deity is very tall, and he was unable to put the crown, the mukuta, on Gopinath. And so he was lamenting that I cannot serve you anymore, I cannot serve you anymore. And so this deity reciprocating with Gadadhar Pandit, actually sat down. And still to this day, if you go for Mangalarati Darshan, you can actually see how the deity is seated down. And this deity sat kind of on the cross-legged, and so Gadadhar Pandit could offer the crown. Such a loving exchange. And it was in this temple that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would go every day and hear Srimad Bhagavatam from Gadadhar Pandit. So they exchanged, after taking darshan of Jagannath, he would immediately go to Gadadhar Pandit at Tota Gopinath temple, and they would recite Srimad Bhagavatam together. And when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu left and wrapped up his pastimes, he actually entered the deity of Gopinath. So very, very intimate relationship between Gadadhar Pandit and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so Gadadhar Pandit, did not want to leave the association of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And again, we see that sometimes, is this a deviation? Is he not listening, not following? Right? We get this, sometimes. But of course, this is out of an extraordinary mood and service. And so in the verse 137, we see no one can understand the loving intimacy between Gadadhar Pandit and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Gadadhar Pandit gave up his vow and service to the association. Gadadhar Pandit gave up his life's vow to engage in Gopinath service. This kind of loving exchange can be understood only by very confidential devotees. Ordinarily, no one can understand its purport. So we see again a very important instruction for us that, is he doing something wrong by giving up his vow to follow, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and not? And again, this is not something we can understand in our observation. And Srila Prabhupada is giving us a very important instruction there. And then in the next verse, though, we see why he was doing it. In 138, then, Gadadhar Pandit's behavior was very pleasing to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's heart. This is the goal of every activity. It wasn't, I want to be with you. It was to please Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He was insistent on carrying forward with him in the journey. So again, not because he wanted to, but because it was very pleasing to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And thus in 140, we get a nice instruction that we see, your wanting to go with me is simply a desire for sense gratification. In this way, you are breaking two religious principles, and because of this, I'm very happy. So there, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, while speaking to Gadadhar Pandit, is really speaking to all of us. Do not act in service for sense gratification. Act in service for what is pleasing to Krishna, to Guru. That is the mood of service. And Gadadhar Pandit, though externally it may seem he was disobeying, again, his behavior was very pleasing to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya very importantly consoles Gadadhar Pandit. And this is extraordinarily important for us to understand the totality of this pastime, where Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya says that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is actually giving up his own desire to protect your vow. Just as Krishna broke his promise by attacking Bhishma Pita, so to withhold the word of his devotee, Krishna broke his own word. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted Gadadhar Pandit to come with him. But to protect Gadadhar Pandit's vow, he gave up his own desire to be with Gadadhar Pandit and forbade him from coming. And this is the exchange, the loving exchange we see between Gadadhar Pandit and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, again, externally or initially we may see it in one light, but we understand by reading these verses in great detail, particularly verse 146, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is being told by Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is telling Gadadhar Pandit that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is giving up his own desire to be with you, so that you can withhold your vow. And so while Gadadhar Pandit was willing to give up his vow to please Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted to protect his devotee. And this is a very frequent occurrence we see of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, always protecting his devotees. The pastimes in this section continue with talking a little bit about the separation of Ramananda Rai and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says, "It is almost intolerable to do so, therefore I cannot describe them any further." You can see the deep intimacy that he could not even write anymore about this very painful separation between Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Rai. So very deep, loving exchanges that we see here in this section. So as the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu carries forward in this journey towards Vrindavan, he is being accompanied by some of the servants, the officers of King Patuparudra from Orissa, and they're accommodating his ways. And they reach the border of the next state. They're at the border of Orissa and the next state. And there is a king who is very dangerous. And we spend some time now discussing this transformation of the king. It's quite an extraordinary set of events, and it shows the great mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. If we just hear this attentively and read this attentively, we will never leave the lotus feet of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And if we really understand this, we'll truly understand the statement Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami makes in Adi Lila that says, whatever is difficult is very easy by the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and whatever is easy becomes very difficult if one does not approach the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So we'll see how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy is so powerful. So this king was very intimidating. He was described as a drunkard, and people would not even walk on the streets freely out of fear of persecution from him. So the Orissan officers were very worried about how to get Chaitanya Mahaprabhu across this tract of land. And so the officers decided, let us go and negotiate a peace settlement. So they asked Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, you please wait here for a few days. Let us pursue some diplomatic efforts, have one summit, and we'll try to negotiate some way for you to be able to cross. But going unannounced or without this plan is too dangerous. This king was very, very heinous in his activities. And when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had set up camp, one of the king's servants or followers in disguise went to see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And there he was immediately transformed. He was blown away by that very beautiful and effulgent personality. And he immediately said, this is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, he is of Muslim faith. And he immediately accepted Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, what a incredible transformation. And he came back and gave the report to the king. And he was in ecstasy. And he was chanting the holy names of Krishna. So immediately, he took to the process of chanting the holy names of the Lord. How long it has taken us to take to the chanting of the holy names? But this servant very quickly took to the process and in an ecstatic mood. So now the king goes through his transformation. So I wanted to discuss basically 5 steps of how this king was transformed. And we'll discuss step by step. These are all discussed over a period of maybe 30 or so verses. But we'll discuss these 5 steps of how. So the first thing he did, when he saw his servant come back in ecstasy and hearing the holy names of the Lord, immediately he sent his secretary to arrange for a meeting. So by hearing about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and hearing the holy names, he became very eager to meet him. And this is the power of hearing. Because one becomes inspired to associate. And we know the power of association. This servant, in an instant, became transformed by association. So this king, his first step was he expressed and had a sincere desire to have an association with the Supreme Lord. Now, the Orissan officers, when this secretary reached those officers and expressed that the king wants to meet Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they were shocked. They said, wait a minute, we thought we had to engage in some difficult diplomatic negotiations and dialogues and 3-4 days of dialogue. But instantly, the king surrendered and said he wants to meet Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So they were shocked. And thus we read now the verse 175, where the arisen officers are thinking, how is this possible? That this very heinous man who had a reputation for so long, all of a sudden wants to meet the king. How is this possible? So this is verse 175. The arisen officer says, it must be Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself who has changed the Muslim's mind. Due to his presence and even due to his remembrance, the whole world is liberated. So that was the verse in purport we read. And we can see that Srila Prabhupada makes many wonderful comments in this purport that we should discuss. The first is that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu can turn anyone's mind to Krishna consciousness. No matter how fallen one may be, no matter how seemingly unqualified one may be, he can turn anyone's mind to Krishna consciousness. And we see, and Chaitanya Srila Prabhupada says, but not even one mlecha or yavana can be changed and adopt Krishna consciousness without Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's grace. So without his grace, not one can chant his names. But with his grace, there is nobody who cannot. And this is the binary position we are in. Without the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, no chance. But with the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we have absolute perfection ahead of us. And that is one of the powerful statements that this verse is saying. And now, Srila Prabhupada makes a very important instruction for us. We may think, well, wait a minute. This king, he was able to see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and thus he was delivered. But what about me? Well, Srila Prabhupada gives us a very important statement in this purport. And this is another post-it worthy statement. This is on line 4. One can be delivered from material existence simply by remembering Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's holy name or by visiting him. So simply by remembering Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's holy name, one can be transformed. Right? The king was actually transformed before he met Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He didn't meet him. Right? His servant came, had the experience, and thus he expressed his desire through the secretary. Before meeting him, he was already transformed, or at least begun a significant transformation. And so Srila Prabhupada gives us the great hope that by remembering his name is non-different. And by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, he's established Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Lord Nityananda in our very own temple, in the Devasadan Mandir, where we can see him and visit him. What fortune we have. Right? So, and then we see that in the next paragraph, or on the next page, that the remembering of the holy names of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu through Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta. And Srila Prabhupada established that we all chant this pranam prayer before we take to the process of chanting the holy names. Why? Because by remembering Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, one can transform the heart through the chanting of the holy names. And that is why before every round of japa, we chant this Panchatattva mantra. Srila Prabhupada knew and established for us, for our great fortune, this importance of chanting this Panchatattva mantra. when Srila Prabhupada established his first kind of altar at 26 2nd Avenue, and where he began to give his discourses. What was behind him, hanging above his head? Picture of Panchatattva. The first picture he introduced in this ISKCON was Panchatattva. Knowing this statement, not one soul can be transformed without the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But with the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, no one has the inability. Everyone is possibly transformed. And this is the great lesson we get from this pastime, this beginning part of the pastime. So that was the first step. Eagerness to see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu from the association of his servant who had a wonderful experience. When his secretary came back, he also went into ecstasy and began chanting. So now the king is really enthusiastic. Wow, he's 2 for 2. Both my servant and my secretary have been transformed. But see how the king understood. So the secretary returned to the Muslim governor and informed him of this news. Dressing himself like a Hindu, the Muslim governor then came to see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. What humility. The king changed his dress to go and see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Now this takes a humble position. How many politicians, when they go and see some saintly person, do they change their dress? Or movie stars, or big company people? But this king had great humility. This humility is step 2 of his transformation. First was his eagerness to meet, and now he took a humble position. He went to what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would appreciate, not in a mood of what he wanted, or his own royal garb. And as a side note, but a practical, when we go and see the Supreme Lord in his home, we should also dress ourselves in according to what Krishna wants to see. We're going to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If we had an appointment with the president of some country, would we go shabbily? Would we go in just any ordinary dress? Would we not comb our hair? Would we not make ourselves presentable? Of course we would. So how about when we are going to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Right? We think, oh, I'm just going to the temple. No, we're going to see the Supreme Lord. We have an appointment. So one should dress themselves accordingly. And this king expressed great humility by changing his dress. It seems so simple and ordinary, but it's quite extraordinary for someone to do that. And we know humility is the key to success. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Tunadapi sunichena tarodapi shishna mani namanadena kirtanaya sadahari. To be able to chant the holy names of the Lord constantly, one must be humble. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is always showing this. He is so pleased by the humility of his devotees. Throughout Chaitanya Caritamrita, you'll see this. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is pleased when he sees someone being humble, and he is displeased when someone is not. Repeatedly. Whether it's King Pataparudra pleasing him by sweeping the street as a king, whether it's Raghunath Das Goswami very humbly taking remnants and old stale prasadam, whether it's Haridas Thakur's not going into the garden when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was calling him, considering himself to be fallen and unqualified to be in the midst of the associates. Repeatedly we see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's devotees expressing this great humility. It is a quality that propels one in Krishna consciousness. And what is this humility? And sometimes we wonder, what is this humility? It is having a real understanding of who we are. It is not about having self-doubt, feeling oneself weak or incapable. It's not about low self-esteem. It is about having a factual understanding that I am part and parcel of Krishna, but I am a tiny spark. But when connected to him, great things can happen. So the humble devotee is very bold, very powerful, very charismatic in leadership, very ambitious, thinks big, but knows who is the real doer. Knows that it is only happening by the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So to be humble doesn't mean meek and weak. It means to just know who is the doer. And then the devotee performs great feats like Srila Prabhupada did. But he never once took an ounce of credit. He knew it was only by the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his spiritual master. So this is the mood of what humility is. It is all by the grace of the Lord one can do this. And we see several other acts of humility by this governor. In verse 179, upon seeing Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu from a distant place, the Muslim governor fell to the ground and offered obeisances. Now this is important. He didn't offer obeisances in front of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but from a distant place, before Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had seen him, he offered. Sometimes, when we say, oh, I offer obeisances, in front of them. But he, out of pure humility, was offering even before Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did. So he was not doing it out of etiquette. He was doing it out of an understanding of who he was as a servant to the Supreme Lord. So this fact that he did it from a distant place is very, very noteworthy. Many will do in front, feeling compelled by custom to offer obeisances. But at a distant place, one only does when their heart desires to. Because they know, if he does it, nobody's looking anyways. So very sweet point here. And what happened to him when he offered obeisances? Tears came to his eyes, and he was jubilant with ecstatic emotions. The mood of his obeisances sparred ecstatic emotions. He was not doing it just begrudgingly. Oh, I'm done on my body. He did it out of desire. And what was the result? Ecstatic emotions. Tears flowed from his eyes. And then he approaches Chaitanya Mahaprabhu with folded hands. And then he asks an amazing question. He says, why I was born in this family? He's a king. Who wants to be born in a king's family? Everyone. And he considers it's the worst place to be, because I cannot take to Krishna consciousness so easily. So, through his inquiry, through his dress, through his obeisances, we see great humility. And this was step 2 in his transformation. Eagerness and humility. Then, the king begins to do something extraordinary. He begins to offer prayers to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Now, in order to offer prayers to someone, one must be very skilled. Because one must know the object of the prayer very well. Because if I try to glorify somebody, but if I don't know their greatness, I may underestimate their greatness in my attempted prayer. So in order to offer these prayers, one has to be quite purified. And yet, this king, because of this humility, this eagerness, was able to offer prayers to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It is indicative of how far he has progressed. And he gives very nice prayers of glorifying Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And his heart was so transformed. We know that when Dhruva Maharaj had perfected his devotional service, and Lord Vishnu had come to see him, being so pleased of his devotion, Dhruva Maharaj could not speak. He could not utter anything. And Lord Vishnu puts the conch on the head of Dhruva Maharaj. And then Dhruva Maharaj was able to offer prayers. And Dhruva Maharaj offers exquisite prayers, glorifying the Supreme Lord. But here we see this governor, by the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, being able to offer prayers, having not even yet received any intimate association. Thus the potency of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And practically for us, there's one guidance for us that, we must follow the prayers of our Vaishnava acharyas. We study Srimad Bhagavatam and we see so many wonderful prayers. We see the prayers in our Vaishnava Sarvabha by Narottam Das Thakur, by Bhakti Vinod Thakur, by Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur, by Srila Prabhupada, by Bhakti Siddhanta Thakur. Because, we may not be yet purified to be able to offer prayers, but we can follow the mood of those pure devotees who have offered prayers. And we recite those prayers as an offering and as a hope to purify our own heart. Because until one is very purified, one can make mistakes in their prayers. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu even corrects this in his pastimes. And so much so that anyone who composed a verse or a prayer to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was not allowed to read it unless Swarup Damodar had sanctioned it. So he would study it, make sure there was no mistake, because sometimes there are even unintentional mistakes in those prayers. So Swarup Damodar would scrub it, detail. If it was perfect, then that prayer would be allowed to be recited in front of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So in our position, what we do, we follow the footsteps of these great acharyas. And they've given us so many beautiful prayers that we can recite daily as a means to purify our heart. But we can see that this king was in a position to transmit prayers. Now the fourth step, after humbly meeting Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, what happens? He has a desire to serve Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is 188. The Muslim governor then said, "Since you have kindly accepted me, please give me some order so that I can render some service." And this purport that Srila Prabhupada writes is beautiful, very powerful purport. He says, if one is purified by following Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's orders, that is, by chanting the holy name of Krishna, one must certainly be eager to render service to the Lord. This is the test. When one engages enthusiastically in the Lord's service, it is to be understood that he is reaping the results of chanting the names of Krishna and Hari. So if one follows the order of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to chant, the result is one becomes eager to serve. And Srila Prabhupada says that is the test. So the test of our purity, one is eagerness to render service to Krishna. So by chanting, one purifies, and one purifies, one becomes eager to serve. And this should be the result of our enthusiastic chanting. And in the next verse, Srila Prabhupada talks about this really powerful presence of chanting the holy names of the Lord, but the eagerness to serve. And so we can measure our progress by how eager are we to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So after having an eagerness to see Him, after approaching in a very humble mood, and then offering very beautiful prayers, this king in the fourth step of his transformation was inspired to render service, and he rendered great service to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, arranging for wonderful boats for him to cross the river. And when he crossed the river, the king was there to receive him and worship his lotus feet. And we see the final step of this transformation. This is verse 200. Finally, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu bade the governor farewell. The intense ecstatic love exhibited by the governor cannot be described. This is Krishna Prema. Ecstatic love cannot be described. So how amazing that this governor was transformed by the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Then can he not transform us? What is our hope? We have full hope. We should have full faith after reading this pastime that a deviant, dangerous, drunkard king had achieved ecstatic love that cannot be described. With eagerness, humility, chanting the holy names of the Lord, sincerity to serve, it's possible. The steps are there, and it is up to us to follow. And these pastimes, they're very, sweet to hear, but they're very instructive. They give us step-by-step instructions of what to do and how to apply it to me in my daily life. They're not just interesting stories, but they're applicable pastimes. And so when we study these, we try to understand, okay, how do I understand how to act? And Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami gives us the benediction at the end of this section, 201. He says, Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu pastimes are all uncommon. Whoever listens to his activities becomes glorious, and his life becomes perfect. Who wants their life to be perfect? Just me? Okay, a few of you. So what do? We listen to the uncommon pastimes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is the mercy. So sweet and so amazing. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu very lovingly and beautifully transformed the king. He continued in his journey, and there were giant crowds. Millions of people were following him. The roads became filled, and so people had to follow him through the dense jungles. And both Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami and Vrindavan Das Thakur described that in the jungle, roads were being formed by the walkway. There were so many people following. And when they had to cross a river, imagine how would you cross 1 million people with boats? And they were just swimming. They would just take an empty pot and paddle across with a pot. They would do whatever it took to get across this river. And it just was a giant wave of people being transformed. They lost all consciousness of who they were, what they were doing, not minding thorny bushes in the forest or inconveniences of being wet or hungry or where to sit. They were just swimming in love with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And it's a very beautiful scene described with masses of people carrying forward. And we know that he goes to Vidyavachaspati's house, who is the brother of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. So that is his brother. And from there, he leaves and goes to Kulia. And ultimately, he makes his way to Shantipur. And so we have a few minutes. Okay, so we have a few minutes. We'll just discuss now. In one verse, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami talks about Sachimata, meeting of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at Shantipur. Now, this pastime is really extraordinary. And so this pastime is described in great detail in chapter 4 of Antya Lila of Chaitanya Bhagavat. And Vrindavan Das Thakur speaks about how this meeting between Sachimata and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took place. So with your permission, we'll take maybe 5-6 minutes and just discuss a brief summary of this. It is extraordinary. So when Advaita Acharya saw Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he came to Shantipur, and he became very enlivened. And immediately he thought, I should call Sachimata. And Sachimata would love to see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and serve him. Now you can see again the mood of Advaita Acharya. Advaita Acharya knows when Sachimata comes, who will get to cook for him? Not Advaita Acharya and Sitarani Thakur, but Sachimata. But he knows what will please Sachimata and what will please Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Advaita Acharya was not being selfish, thinking, let me hoard Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to myself. No, immediately, go call Sachimata. And so he sent a palanquin from Shantipur to Mayapur. And they go and reach Mayapur. And there Vrindavan Das Thakur is explaining the mood of Sachimata. This mood is very difficult to comprehend. She's explaining that when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu left Mayapur, at this time Jagannath Mishra had already gone, Vishnupriya had also gone, so Sachimata was there and being, taken care of by some associates, but she was in some sense alone. But actually, she was in a deep, ecstatic mood. And externally, she had no consciousness. And she would be roaming around and asking, how are things happening in Mathura? How is Krishna and Balaram? Is Kamsa, that evil Kamsa, is he dead yet? Where is that thief Akrura who stole my Krishna and Balaram? And like this all day long, she would be chanting. Then she would be yelling, Krishna and Balaram, it's time to milk the cows. I have to sell the milk in the market. And she would be chastising them. Sometimes she would run around the house with a stick and chase, oh, you butter thief, I'm going to get you. Reenacting Damodar Leela. And Vrindavan Das Thakur is describing this ecstatic mood of Sachimata. And nobody could understand it. And when she would cry in separation, it would be so intense that even the stones and wood would melt in so much pain, seeing Sachimata's ecstatic love in separation of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Krishna and Balaram. She would ask the neighbors, let's go bathe in the Yamuna, although the Yamuna was nowhere near where they were, only the Ganges is there. And so like this, she was fully immersed in the pastimes of Krishna. And it explains, Vrindavan Das Thakur explains that the only time she was conscious externally was to serve her deities. Other than that, she was in complete other world. 6 hours she would just be laughing and laughing uncontrollably, or laying on the ground and trembling in all these ecstatic symptoms. So this was how she carried out her time. So when she heard the news from Shantipur that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would come, she became so ecstatic and enthusiastic. And so she quickly got on the palanquin and very quickly reached Shantipur. And there we hear of an extraordinary meeting between Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Sachimata after a long, long separation. And this pastime is very sweetly described. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as soon as he saw Sachimata, offers his obeisances. And he offers his obeisances. And then he approaches her. And he is offering prayers and glorifying her. And tears are flowing. And saying the tears were fully bathing his body. Fully immersed in tears of love as he is glorifying Sachimata. And I wanted to read one of the glorifications. He says that you are Ganga, you are Devaki, you are Yashoda, you are Devahuti, you are Krishna, Anusuya, Kaushalya, and you are Aditi. So he's establishing Sachimata is the eternal mother of Lord Krishna. And, everything is emanated from you, and he just very gloriously offering prayers, and just tears are flowing from his eyes. And Sachimata is just stunned. And Vrindavan Das Thakur said, Mother Sachi stood there like a wooden doll as the Lord of Vaikuntha respectfully offered her prayers. She was stunned and just stood there as a wooden doll. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is circambulating her. And this sweet, sweet pastime. And all the associates who are seeing it are completely overwhelmed. And, Lord Nityananda goes into, a whole trance. Advaitacharya begins to offer prayers glorifying Mother Devaki. And all the devotees merge into a transcendental bliss. And Vrindavan Das Thakur says, no one can fully describe the happiness that everyone does. He says, human beings have no power to describe the happiness that was experienced there. A very sweet and powerful meeting between Sachimata and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and all the associates went into complete ecstasy. So then Advaitacharya took permission from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and asked if Sachimata can cook. And so Sachimata cooked a wonderful offering. And what did she cook? We discussed 2 sessions ago, what is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's favorite item? Shaka, spinach. So it says that she cooked 20 different varieties of spinach. 20 different varieties. And each of them she made in several different ways. So she made an extraordinary feast for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, put tulsi manjaris on the big piles of rice, and then made a beautiful seat for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and then invited him to seat. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saw it, he said, the Lord said, what to speak of eating this rice? One is freed from material bondage just by seeing it. And then he offered obeisances and circumambulated the offering. Because this was coming from the hands of Mother Sachi. So much love she cooked with. Vrindavan Das Thakur says, I'm unable to describe such cooking. Even by smelling the rice, one develops devotion to Krishna. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was seated and began to honor. And he was enjoying all the different shaka spinach preparations, particularly. There were many other preparations, but that he was enjoying the most. And then he began to describe, if you eat this shaka, you'll get attachment to Krishna. If you eat this shaka, you'll get attachment to devotee association. This one, you'll become free from material bondage. And he kept describing all the different types of vegetables and what they do. And in this way, Mother Sachi was in ecstasy seeing her beloved Nimai eating so sumptuously all the wonderful offerings. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu finished the offerings, and then he got up. And then my favorite part of the pastime, Vrindavan Das Thakur says, as soon as he got up and went to wash his hands, so when he went to sit down, he invited all the associates, and they were enjoying watching him enjoy eating all of Mother Sachi's cookings. But as soon as they got up, Vrindavan Das Thakur says, the devotees devoured and plundered the remnants of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so they went and attacked it. And they were saying, this is mine. I take this plate. I am a Shudra. I am most qualified. I am a Brahmana. Like this, all the devotees, Vrindavan Das Thakur says, plundered the remnants. We see this sometimes, right? When Mahaprasad comes out, we just run and plunder. So the devotees were so enthusiastic to honor the remnants of this. You can imagine Sachi Mata's love into these offerings that then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ate, and what potency that Maha has. But if we just pray and chant the names of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that same mercy from that Maha, from Mother Sachi's offerings, can be had by all of us. There is no difference. And that is the supreme potency of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And just some of the pastimes discussed in this section of chapter 16. This pastime will continue, this chapter will continue with Raghunath Das Goswami meeting Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Shantipur and carrying on his journey. So we'll hopefully, Krishna willing, discuss those in the coming weeks. So thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Anta Koti Vaishnavinda ki jai. Hare Krishna. Please forgive me if I misspoke anything or made any mistakes. Any comments or corrections, clarification?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dhamma Pranam, Guru Sri Prabhupada Guru Maharaj. Very nice, Prabhuji. Thank you so much for again the beautiful narration of the pastimes. In the beginning part, I had a question. I'm still a little confused. I'm sorry for the repetition if you may need to do about the relationship there between Gadadhar Pandit and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He not following instructions, and I know we cannot understand, but there is some question. I mean, I'm not able to understand it actually. You can explain so that.
Yeah. So remember that. So Gadadhar Pandit is Srimati Radharani, and Srimati Radharani her only activity is to please Krishna. So when Srimati Radharani is chastising Krishna, she is not doing out of her own enjoyment, but only because it pleases Krishna. When she runs away from Krishna, she is not doing it out of spite or anger, but simply to give Krishna more pleasure in the pastime. So, whatever Gadadhar Pandit does, it is only to please Krishna, to please Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Right? And so that's why in verse 138, it says that Gadadhar Pandit's actions were very pleasing to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So that is the key, is that those activities were pleasing to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya explains why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did not want him to carry forward. Because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, from his own desire, wanted Gadadhar Pandit to come with him. And that is what Gadadhar Pandit was acting upon, knowing Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's desire. So Gadadhar Pandit was not acting on his desire, he was acting on Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's desire. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was giving up his own desire to protect the vow of his devotee, Gadadhar Pandit, who had taken Kshetra Sannyas. So to protect that vow, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was telling him, you go back, you go back. Now Gadadhar Pandit is saying, I'm willing to take all the consequences of breaking my vow, and whatever, reactions may come from that, because it's going to please you. So that mood was Gadadhar Pandit's. Now, what do we do? Well, we cannot imitate that mood, because one, do we know what Krishna really wants? No. We only can follow the instructions of Guru. Well, how do we know? Do we follow the instruction of Guru or what the Guru really wants? Well, that becomes a deeper level of analysis. Unless one is extraordinarily purified, the best action is to follow the instruction as it is. And I can say in all circumstances, because let's be honest, our ability to understand the deeper meanings of the spiritual master are virtually impossible. So for our practical understanding, we know that we follow as it is, without interpretation, without question, without doubt. But when Lord Nityananda or Gadadhar Pandit do something of this nature, we understand that it is based on their level of purity to understand the real intention of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And unless one can come to the point where they truly have no motive, no desire, but to please Krishna, it is very dangerous to try to interpret or analyze the instruction. Because a tinge of self-motive will lead one down the completely wrong path. The smallest tinge of self-motive. One has to be absolutely surrendered. So until then, one must follow instruction as it is. But what we understand from this is the extraordinary rasa relationship between Krishna and his devotee. How sweet it is that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave up his own desire to protect his devotee, and his devotee was willing to give up his own safety for the pleasure of Krishna. And that is the reciprocal surrendered relationship that exists in pure love. Is that okay, Prabhupada?
Yes, perfect, Prabhuji. Each trying to please the other, and they know what the other person's heart's desire.
Yes.
It's kind of that
Yes.
beautiful explanation. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Yeah.
That's really understanding.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
And I just want to continue to emphasize our extraordinary inability to decipher, and we must follow as it is, because we don't have the purity to really get to that. At some point one may, but that is long, long down the road. Any other questions or comments? Okay. If no one else has anything else, then we can conclude for today. Once again, thank you very much for this opportunity to discuss Chaitanya Caritamrita. I'm very grateful for this morning reading group. If anybody would like to join this group, again, Monday through Friday, 9:15 to 10, devotees are getting together and reading this Chaitanya Caritamrita. So if anybody would like to join, you can message Palika Mataji or Nitya Krishna Mataji or any of the other devotees, Lalikarami Mataji. I know several of you are on here, Padma Gopi Mataji and others. So please message any of them. They'll give you the details and join and enjoy this nectarian pastimes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava ki jai. Hare Krishna.